Column in detail. You can configure the column detail by using the specification dialog box. To open the specification dialog box, you just need to right-click on a column and then select the open specification. Or you can select the column, just hit the enter key in your keyboard. Then you will see the open the specification dialog box of your selected column like this. Let's walk through the different fields you can set in the specification dialog box. The first one is the domain. This domain is same as the domain we introduced in the table. It also contains a set of reusable values that you can reuse when you design your database. The usage is you create the domain and then you set the type, length, and this default value, etc. Then you can reuse another column when you need it. The benefit of using the domain is you can save the time in creating similar columns. You say, for example, you have the datetime format for your company. You don't use the system datetime. You want to use the varchar format to store in your own format. Then you can define this domain. And also to keep the database design consistent. Let's take a look about how to set the domain. Here I have the photo and uploader entities. For example, I want to add an upload date to the photo table. I just right click and add a column, say upload date. Then I right click, open specifications. To change the type of the upload date, you can change the type by select the type, but now I want to show you the domain. I click on the domain and configure domains. Then you will see a configure domain dialog box. I don't have any domains right now. I just add a new one. You can give the name to the domain. This is date. And then I just select the varchar and the length is 8. For this domain, the age, you can write the description, say the type is year, and month, and the date, something like that, as the descriptions. I click OK and OK. Now I can choose the date as the domain type. I click OK. Now I assume I want to also add the date to the uploader. I want to say the join date. The uploader join our system. I can right click, open specification, and then I can select the date again. Now you see both is varchar 8. You may say, why don't I just set the domain? The reason is if you want to change your mind, you right click, open the spec again, and then you can configure the date. Now I change my mind, the date will change to 10. And also store the hyphen between the year, month, and date. I click OK. OK. Now you see both the upload date and the join date are changed to varchar 10. You don't need to go through all the table and change by yourself one by one. And then we look into the type. You can set the type of the column you want. And for example, the integer, the char, varchar, etc. And different database vendor I'm referring to may support different types of different database type. So, say for example, the MySQL support the decimal, Oracle support the flow, timestamp in Oracle, and date time in MS SQL. You can configure the database type by using the tool, database, DB, and DB database configuration. First, we go to the tools, and you find the DB button in the toolbar, and then you click the DB, click the database configuration, and then you will see a list of database supported by Visual Paradigm. Now I select my SQL. Just make sure you understand I have the type is in my SQL. If I change to use Oracle set as default and I click OK, now you see it's changed to number. In MySQL, the integer stored as in Oracle is stored number. Visual Paradigm will help you to change the data type based on your default database setting. So if you want to generate the database script for different types of database, it's easy and straightforward in Visual Paradigm. And then you can configure the length. The length is about maximum allowable data to store into that. If you're talking about the varchar, that means how many characters you can put into this column. The user type. User types is for you to define your own types rather than using the database built-in data type. For example, you use the elum to build your own settings. And the user types only effective when you generate the database. Under the user type, you will see the default value. The default value is when you insert the data into the database, into this column, and you don't specify the value, then we will set it to automatically for you. And then the ID generation. The ID generation property is for you to select which strategy you want to generate to produce the primary key column. And we have different settings. Just walk you through few very commonly used. The aside, that means when you insert the column, insert the data into the database, you need to set the ID by yourself. And you need to keep it unique, and you need to make sure it is not null. And the other things, other commonly used is the GUID. You can request the database to generate the GUID. It's only supported in MS SQL and MySQL. And the other things we usually use is the lative. The lative is a default one. The lative one means the database will be automatically generate the value to your primary key when you insert the row of data into the database, into the table. We will have more about different types of strategy later on when we're talking about primary key. And also the sequence. In Oracle, DB2, and PostgreSQL, we can define the sequence to generate the ID. It's similar to the lative generate, but you can define the range and the generation strategy for different loading and different usage of your database. After that is the check constraints. It allows certain value to be filled into the column. It's used when you generate database and you insert the data. If the value is not fall in this range, this constraint, then you will got exceptions when you insert data into the table. The generated property. The generated is only used for the ORM, more specifically the Hibernate. When you generate the Hibernate, then you can instruct the Hibernate to, if you set it to always, then no matter you update the row or insert the row, this column will be set as last modified. So it's used when you use the Hibernate. We will cover the Hibernate later on in this training. And sync to attribute also for the Hibernate is allow you instruct the database table to synchronize to the class diagram to corresponding class, and the column name will be linked to the attribute name, and the column type will be linked to the attribute type. And then you see the DDL clause. The DDL clause is a text that you can append to the end of the create stable statement. So if you have some very database specific and we don't support in the above property, then you can append the text, say something like the special constraints only support in your database, then you can insert here. Under the DDL clause, you see the descriptions. It is text, rich text for you to describe the column in detail. It is useful when you creating the data dictionary. Then your reader can understand what this column is used for. And when you generate a database table, it will show as a comment So if you generate the DDL, you will see the description, so enter here as a comment. Under the description box, we got 4 checkbox. The first one is include as a primary key. The primary key is a unique identified value for each record in the table. We talk about more primary key later on. And one entity can have 0 or 1 primary key, and the primary key can formed by multiple columns. So you can combine multiple columns to be a primary key, but each table only have 1 primary key. And then the lowerable checkbox, if you take it, that is allowed to insert a low value. And this situation is applicable when you set it to lowerable. The value to be filled later on, or the value is optional, it can be unspecified. And make sure when to use the lowerable field and it does not break your business rule. For example, if you require the user to input the social security number, you make sure the column is not set lowerable to true, so don't take this box. And next to the nullable is a unit. It is used for ensure the data in this column is not duplicated across the whole table. And it can be null. And the index is used to improve the speed of the data retrieval. And you can set the column to be indexed. Then all the data in this column will be indexed by the database engine. And we will look at the index in more detail. Index. As we said before, the database is the key component of your application. So if you have a good performance database, you will get a very fast responding application. The index is one of the approach you can speed up the database. Let's take a look about if we do the database without the index. Say we want to find the uploader email address is tony.stanley.ca@gmail.com. Then the database need to walk through row by row, and then finally identify this is the row we're looking for. If you have the index, it can speed up the query of specific record a lot. Let's take an example about to use the binary search index. The same data set we have, and then we set the uploader email address as the index column. Then we will have an index table to store these values, and the index table will be sorted by using different algorithm. Let's say for the simple one, we sort by alphabetical order from A to Z. And then when you want to search the specific email address, then we don't need to search from beginning to the end. You just need to first find the middle one. Then you compare, is the Kim is bigger than or smaller than the Tony. After that, you go through another directions to search to scope. Finally, you just go through 2 or 3 paths. Then you will find the Tony.Stanley. Then you can link to the corresponding row of the actual data. So you see it's much faster. If you just have hundreds of rows, it doesn't matter. If you have millions or billions of the row of data in your database, then the index can really speed up the searching. And again, your system is not using by single user. It's supposed to be used by a lot of users. So then you may ask, why not set every column as an index? But we need to have some consideration. First, you need to consider the storage space. If you set the column or columns to be an index column, then you need more space to store the index table. It makes sense. You store extra data, of course. The consideration too is the performance. If you write the data into the table, it not just write to the table you define, it also need to update or insert the data in the index table in order to make sure when you search the data, it got the accurate result. So when you pick the column to be the index or the row, which columns to be the index, you need to think about, is this database is a read more than write. If you keep writing, say I write thousands times, I just read it once, then it doesn't make sense to index it. If you have the data, like usually the user profile in our example, the upload information, the user don't update the information so often, so it's good to index it. Then when we read it with the photo, we need to locate the corresponding uploader. Then the index can take a great advantage. So to set the index in Visual Paradigm is easy, and you have two options. You can set the index in the table space. You can have multiple columns combined to be the index, or you can specify single column as index. Let's take a look about table space. To set the table space is easy. You just right click on the entity and open the specification. After that, you go to the index tab in the specification dialog box and click the add button. After that, you can select which columns you want to be the index, and then move to the right hand side. Left is the all column, right hand side is selected, and then click OK to confirm. Then you set this column to be the index. You can set the column as an index by just right click on the column and then select and click on the index menu item. Then you will set the column to be the index. And remember, when you set to index, you need some extra space and extra CPU when you write the data into the database, into the table. So use it with care. Let's summarize what we talked about in this lecture. We talked about how to open the specification in the column. And I walked you through different properties that you can set into the column, and also introduce the idea of index and how to use the index when you're using the Visual Paradigm.